This is an NBC News special report.
And breaking news tonight, the deadly siege on Congress as an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol. We've seen shocking images of chaos, rioters rushing past barricades and police up the Capitol steps, forcing their way inside. Both the House and the Senate evacuated. Lawmakers moved to safe locations. The invaders roaming the abandoned Senate floor, one hanging from the balcony. Police with guns drawn inside the House. The violence erupting, one woman fatally shot outside the Capitol. Improvised explosive devices found. Several people injured. Offices vandalized. Windows smashed. The National Guard called in to quell the unrest, with that city now under curfew. The breach abruptly halting a joint session of Congress just as Republicans launched a last-ditch effort to overturn President-elect Biden's victory in the Electoral College. This unrest breaking out just after President Trump spoke at a rally near the White House, stoking the crowd by falsely claiming he won the election. Later, in a taped message, the president still baselessly saying the election was stolen, but telling rioters to go home. All of it coming just as Democrats win control of the Senate after the historic election in Georgia. A lot to talk about as we continue our rolling coverage. I want to welcome you back to NBC News coverage of the siege at the U.S. Capitol. Right now, police in Washington enforcing a curfew, driving rioters from the streets and Capitol grounds after securing the inside from those pro-Trump intruders who occupied the Capitol for several hours. Officials telling us a short time ago that one person shot inside the Capitol by law enforcement has died. All this taking place as the House and Senate met to formally count the certified electoral ballots that will make Joe Biden the next president. Our Casey Hunt is on Capitol Hill. Casey, bring us up to date.
Lester, just absolutely stunning images today here at the Capitol as protesters overran the Capitol and multiple law enforcement agencies had to be called in after a number of them not only breached the building, but breached the very floor of the House and of the Senate as they were conducting this business of trying to count the Electoral College votes, normally a very straightforward process that only takes about a half an hour, that would name Joe Biden as president-elect. This, of course, occurring after President Trump held a rally with tens of thousands of people outside of the White House. And the images inside the building were pretty unreal. There were protesters that were on the walls of the Capitol, as well as gunshots at one point. Watch. Tonight, stunning images as rioters supporting President Trump overrun the Capitol, scuffling with police. On the floor of the House, officers with guns drawn, with protesters just outside the door. Here you see rioters trying to break down a door, and you hear a gunshot. Over in the Senate, protesters breaching what's supposed to be the highly secure Senate floor, abruptly stopping the counting of electoral votes. Some taking photos on the Senate dais, others shouting and pushing past officers to get inside. Elsewhere, this man sitting with his feet up behind a desk in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Police placing the Capitol on lockdown.
A riot was declared. It was clear that the crowd was intent on causing harm to our officers by deploying chemical irritants on police.
Members of Congress rushing to take shelter, some wearing gas masks.
We were just told that there has been tear gas in the rotunda, and we're being instructed to each of us get gas masks that are under our seats.
It began just after that massive pro-Trump rally. Tens of thousands gathering near the White House to protest the expected declaration of Joe Biden's Electoral College victory.
There is the American flag, and beneath it, these crowds of people now who have stormed, trying to make their wishes known.
The group then marching to the Capitol, many just standing on the steps outside, others wandering in the rotunda, some scaling down the building. At one point, an armed standoff. Police say one person was shot. Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger describing to us how she got out of the building.
There were people banging on the doors of the floor of the House of Representatives. It took multiple efforts for us to be able to make our way safely and then depart the Capitol. It's deeply, deeply disturbing what we saw at the U.S. Capitol today.
Top House Republican Kevin McCarthy condemning what he was seeing.
This is so un-American. I condemn any of this violence. This is not the American way. This is not protected by the First Amendment. This must stop now.
Multiple Democratic and Republican lawmakers urged President Trump to appear on camera to tell the protesters to leave. Instead, he later tweeted asking protesters to remain peaceful and respect police. The president-elect then imploring President Trump to speak.
At their best, the words of a president can inspire. At their worst, they can incite. And therefore, I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
The White House later putting out a video statement. Many Republicans urging the president to go farther in trying to ensure calm, to calm this situation down and to make it easier to have a peaceful transfer of power to Joe Biden. Lester.
All right, Casey Hunt, thank you. And one of those caught in today's assault was Congressman Mike Gallagher, a Wisconsin Republican. He joins us tonight on the phone. First of all, Congressman, are you someplace safe and well?
I am. Yeah, we're kind of sheltering in place here, but I honestly never thought I'd be barricading the doors and watching what I saw happen today in the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, I mean, some of the images are stunning, and you saw them firsthand. Can you walk us through what happened? I know the Senate and House had split apart for the purposes of debating some objections. When did you realize something was amiss?
Well, it was almost simultaneous with the debate over the certification of Arizona's electors when the protesters started to gather at the foot of the Capitol, and things quickly descended into violence. You know, you heard multiple flashbangs being deployed, which was presumably the Capitol Police trying to get the protesters to back off. The protesters were violently clashing with the police. Earlier in the day, one of the buildings had been evacuated when protesters breached the perimeter. And then somehow they breached the security perimeter of the Capitol itself. And they started breaking down windows, running amok in Statuary Hall, eventually got onto the Senate floor and the House floor. And then, you know, the vice president was evacuated by Secret Service. And then someone was shot. And it's my understanding that that person has died. I mean, that is the cost of what has happened today. I mean, someone died in the United States Capitol in America today. I mean, this is unacceptable. And I think, if nothing else, the objectors need to stop playing this dangerous game. We need to reconvene tonight when order is restored. The objectors need to stand down. We need to certify the results of the election. And Donald Trump is ultimately going to have to concede. That's the only way we avoid stuff like this in the future. As a Republican, it bums me out that we lost the presidential election. But such is life. When you lose, you take a second, you look in the mirror, and you figure out how you can do better next time. And that's what we need to do as a party right now.
So, Congressman, it appears they have secured the Capitol now, but that doesn't change the belief in the people we're seeing here that this election was somehow stolen. And the president probably didn't help things today by his remarks. So where does that leave us tomorrow and the next day?
Well, I think the prudent move, once we all say it together that the election's over and we support the peaceful transition of power, is to not dismiss the concerns of election fraud that we've seen in multiple states. I think many states, including my home state of Wisconsin, need their state legislatures to do a version of what Florida did after the 2000 election. There were certainly changes that were made at the last second in the midst of the pandemic, and we've had a massive increase in absentee balloting. And I think it's fair for the legislatures to take a step back and say, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and here's how we can give our citizens confidence in the integrity of the election. But that's a separate question than the question of whether Congress should or even has the authority to overturn the results of the state election. I mean, I don't see a reading of that anywhere in the Constitution. That is a recipe for chaos. It's certainly not a conservative reading of the Constitution. It's a highly progressive one. And I just don't believe the federal government should have that power. That power belongs to the states and to the people.
Congressman Mike Gallagher, we're glad you're well. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
As you heard, all this happened as Congress was in the middle of certifying, not actually certifying, the votes have been certified, but they were counting the Electoral College vote for President-elect Joe Biden and debating objections to that vote. Let's get more on that from NBC's Kristen Welker.
Those stunning images of a mob storming the Capitol followed another extraordinary moment.
Madam Speaker, members of Congress.
Vice President Mike Pence presiding over the special session of Congress in which the electoral votes are counted and the winner of the presidential election declared. And for the first time, Pence publicly breaking with the president.
Are you going to overturn the election results today?
Refusing the president's demands that he unlawfully overturn electoral votes for Biden. Pence releasing a letter saying, "My oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." That letter released just minutes after President Trump called out Pence multiple times.
Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us.
At a massive rally across from the White House.
So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do. And I hope he doesn't listen to the rhinos and the stupid people that he's listening to.
Later tweeting Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. Today again pushing false claims of widespread fraud.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
And today, for the first time, the top Senate Republican Mitch McConnell blasting the president and those rejecting Joe Biden's electoral college win.
If this election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral.
Still, at least 13 Republican senators and dozens of House Republicans were poised to raise objections to the results in at least 6 states, unless a commission is created to audit the election.
What does it say to the nearly half the country that believes this election was rigged if we vote not even to consider the claims of illegality and fraud in this election?
But shortly after the debate began, those protesters started storming in. And shortly after that moment, all the debate ended. They were going alphabetically through the states and never made it past Arizona. Lester.
Krista, we're hearing that some in the White House are now asking the president to make a more forceful statement. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's absolutely right, Lester. I can tell you that some top White House staff are urging the president to respond strongly to what transpired today. Now, officials don't know if he's actually going to say anything else or issue a more forceful statement. And some Trump allies outside the White House are frustrated with his reluctance to do so. They had wanted him to go further in his remarks and to say something live, not what he released on tape. But the president is hesitant to aggressively push back against his own supporters.
All right.
Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House. Thank you. President-elect Joe Biden forcefully condemned today's assault. He called on President Trump to step up and demand an end to the siege. Our Jeff Bennett joins us now. Jeff, what else did Mr. Biden have to say?
Hey, Lester, the president-elect condemned the actions of the rioters as an insurrection, saying their behavior bordered on sedition. He also called out President Trump for inciting the violence, and Biden also talked about the challenges ahead. Take a look.
The work of the moment and the work of the next 4 years must be the restoration of democracy, of decency, honor, respect, the rule of law, just plain, simple decency.
Now, in recent weeks, we've seen Joe Biden increasingly step into this apparent leadership void, delivering addresses to the nation about the pandemic, about the tough economy, and now this crisis in our democracy. And asked by reporters, Biden said he wasn't concerned about his own safety, his own security, or even his own inauguration, which is set to happen at the U.S. Capitol outside in 2 weeks' time. Lester.
Yeah, a lot of conversation about that in light of what has happened here. All right, Jeff, thank you. And we noted that curfew now underway in Washington. Police have been working to disperse the rioters from the Capitol and the area. Gabe Gutierrez is on the ground for us there. Gabe, what's the latest? Are people beginning to move along and disperse?
Lester, it's an extremely eerie scene out here, out in front of the Capitol. Earlier, there was all this chaos. Now it is extremely quiet. As we were coming here a short time ago, driving through this area and walking through this area, we heard loudspeakers blaring that a curfew was in effect. A great deal of National Guard members were also here, and they were also on very high alert. Lester, it's incredible to see the Capitol just like this as night falls. The question will be, will there be more protesters that stick around? But at this point, I can tell you, as you can see from the street behind me, people have emptied out. There doesn't appear to be a lot of protesters here remaining. But it was incredible to witness this earlier today. Lester, I've covered an incredible amount of protests over the last few months, past few years, and to see these protesters breach the Capitol. I spoke by phone, and as I was making my way here, to a Republican congressman who was negotiating with some of these rioters inside the Capitol as they were trying to make their way in. He said it was just an incredible sight, un-American, and so many people around the country right now are asking, how could this happen? How could these rioters be allowed to breach the walls of the United States Capitol? But again, right now, a curfew is in effect and the streets are quiet. Lester?
All right, Gabe, thank you very much. Let's turn to Republican Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. He's on the phone as well. Congressman, thank you for being well. I assume that you're someplace now safe?
Yes, sir. We're all in good standings.
As we noted, the Senate and House had split apart to begin dealing with some of these objections. You yourself have objected to some of the state certifications. Will that process now end as the approval of the vote resumes?
You know, I think you probably hear a different tone from both sides. We should be. I mean, while everybody is responsible for their own actions, we can also learn to debate better than this. And at the end of the day, we still have a constitutional authority with the electoral vote for January 6th. And so as soon as the perimeter is secure, I believe we'll be going back to work. Will you drop your objections? No, the objection is still there. To contest the electoral vote is still my constitutional authority and my obligation. And so to contest it is something I feel very strongly about. It's not political. It's something I feel like is my constitutional authority to do so. And so we will do that, but we can do it in a more civilized manner. And I think that goes for all of us. Listen, a lot of the rhetoric that's been given from both sides over the last 5 years as why everybody is responsible for their own actions, this bubbled to this point, and this should have never happened. This is a dark day, and this kind of action is not acceptable from anybody. I don't care what your reason is. This is never acceptable. Do you think your actions, those of others who have challenged these electoral votes, in some way help fuel what played out today? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. That's almost ridiculous because we've heard both sides have real bad rhetoric for 5 years. We've seen protests going on for 5 years. And to be quite honest, we've never seen this from Trump supporters before. They've been out there. They've confronted. They've had interactions with Antifa and other groups before. We've had Trump rallies. We've seen them have rallies before. And we've never seen violence. We've never seen this before, not from Trump supporters. And so I wouldn't even call this really protesters. There was agonizers that went into the protesters. I had the opportunity to go and visit with a lot of our men and women that stood guard, that were putting their life on the line to make sure that members and staff gets to go home safe at some point. And they have families too. And I went down to the triage center, and there may have been 25 or 50 of them, I don't know, but they were bloody and bruised. And one young man, I'm sure, is going to lose his eye. And they were shaken up. And I asked them what happened, and they said there was a group that broke away from the protesters, and they had evil in their eyes. These weren't just your normal protesters; they had evil in their eyes, and there wasn't just one or two or three of them that said that to me. There was multiple ones that I talked to, but at the end of the day, we are all responsible for our own actions regardless. We're responsible for our behavior, and I think President Trump did a good job by telling them to go home, and then he even told them that he loved them, and a lot of people want to make a big deal about that. But listen, every morning I wake up and I say, love the people, love the call. I love these people too, but what they did today was inexcusable, and unfortunately even a young lady lost her life because of it. And there's two lives that changed there. The officer that discharged his weapon, I don't care who you are, the first time you discharge your weapon, it takes a part of you, and there's going to be, and so his life has been changed. And there's some people that love that young lady. I don't know her age, but I know she had to have family, and there's a family that's broken today because our behavior got out of line, and we are better than that. We don't do that. Congressman Mullen, we're glad you're safe. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Bye. The world is watching as these chaotic scenes play out. A number of world leaders calling on President Trump to condemn the violence. Richard Engel is in London with a global reaction. Richard, it was fascinating to hear some of the things coming from overseas, the kind of things that have come from this country and other times.
Well, by now, Lester, there have been dozens of reactions from world leaders, and they have been condemning what has happened. There have been expressions of shock, expressions of horror, and they are all saying that this was an attack on democracy. Here in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson tweeted out that it is now vital that there should be a peaceful and orderly transfer of power. Germany's foreign minister said the enemies of democracy will be pleased at these unbearable images. The leader of the Secretary General of NATO, the world's most powerful military alliance, said that shocking scenes in Washington, the outcome of this democratic election, must be respected. And around the world, leaders were placing blame directly on President Trump. The Prime Minister of Sweden tweeted out that, one more, President Trump and many members of Congress have a great responsibility for what is happening now. A spokesman for the president of South Africa simply tweeted, "Pray for America."
All right, Richard, thank you. I want to turn now to our Frank Thorpe, who's also at the Capitol. He tweeted some stunning video of intruders roaming free on the Senate floor today. Frank, tell us some of the things you've seen and observed.
Yeah, Lester, I mean, I just have to say, I cannot stress enough what a stunning and surprising and shocking scene it was to walk into the gallery above the Senate floor and see the dozen or so rioters who had made it onto the Senate floor. The Senate floor is one of the most historic places that it handles the legislative work for senators, and it is incredibly locked down. Not only is the Capitol locked down, there are multiple levels of security to get into the Capitol every day, but the Senate chamber, the Senate floor, is one of the most sacred rooms in the Capitol, and to see these rioters on the floor was a stunning situation. I have to say, Lester, one of the things that I had been told by aides in the last couple of weeks is that they were worried by the calls by President Trump to have people come to the Capitol and to gather outside the Capitol. They were worried that something like this could happen, and it did. And it's just this, I cannot express the unprecedented nature of the rioters coming into the Capitol, not having gone through security, and storming the floor like they did.
Yeah, you and I were on the air live when those images first came in of that scene from the Senate, and I think both of us were left speechless for a moment. Quite extraordinary. Frank Thorpe, thank you for your reporting. I want to bring in our political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Boy, Chuck, what does this say about a division in America? This thing may be, being put to rest tonight, but the feelings are still very strong, and they are out there.
A couple weeks ago on Meet the Press, Lester, I started off and I just simply asked the question, is this the 1850s or the 1950s, talking about the divides in America? And frankly, I was referring to sort of, in the 1950s, we had the Red Scare, you had Joseph McCarthy, but we shut that down, right? We somehow came together and we shut that down as a country. In the 1850s, obviously, the divide in this country culminated in the Civil War. And so you now look at an event like today, and making a comparison to the 1850s is suddenly, no longer hyperbole, which some of us, I think, were accused of over the last few years. The sad thing about all this, Lester, is that, well, we're all shocked by what we witnessed today. Are we that surprised? We've all been concerned this moment was coming, that we had a president of the United States that was fomenting this, that he had a propaganda machine, frankly, behind him that helped him push this. So I do think this is gut check time. We still have elected leaders in this country, I think, who would like to keep this republic standing. President Trump's actions cannot go unanswered. You've heard various people talk impeachment. You've heard some people bring up the 25th Amendment. I don't think these are ideas that are just being tossed around. These should be serious conversations. Whether, there's a lot of senators right now locked up with Vice President Pence right now. Because you got to ask yourself, is the president mentally fit at this point and has the temperament to handle the presidency even for the next 13 days? What he did today and his actions as they continue all night tonight have to call those things into question. So these conversations, I think, are taking place, and they're real.
And some of those things you mentioned, obviously very emotional, and many people would have called them alarmists weeks ago, perhaps not tonight. Presidential historian Michael Beschloss is with us as well. Michael, there's 2 more weeks left in this presidency. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but where is this going?
It's going in ways that are very ominous, Lester. You know, this is a day I hoped I would never live to see. We saw a terrorist attack on the United States Congress and the United States Capitol, and it was instigated by the President of the United States, who today at midday told this big mob, march up Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol and take back our country, and stop the counting of the ballots that will lead to an election that he charged was stolen. And once they were with guns and other weapons and committing violence in the Capitol, he made a video in the Rose Garden saying, "We love you and you're very special." We have never seen anything like that in more than 2 centuries of American history. I hope we never do again, but it has to stop. He's in office for 2 more weeks. We can't live with the possibility that this kind of thing will spread and get worse.
You know, we've all seen things today that may make us shudder. Michael, thank you. The question many asking tonight, how did this assault on the Capitol happen? Why wasn't it more secure when Trump supporters have been threatening similar actions for months? Let's go to Tom Costello with that.
For weeks, right-wing online chatter had discussed just this scenario. The president had called for protesters to march on Capitol Hill. Washington's mayor had called out the National Guard to protect the city streets. Every D.C. police officer was on the job.
Today's events were not representation of peaceful protests. Today, what we witnessed was unlawful, riotous behavior.
The question tonight, why weren't Capitol Police prepared for this?
We need to ask questions about why it was or was not designated a national special event and why the security around it was insufficient.
2,300 officers make up the Capitol Police Force. Today, they appeared to be on the defensive, retreating as the crowd pushed forward, forced to pull their guns in the House chambers. But none of the kind of aggressive tactics police used against mostly peaceful protesters last June in front of the White House after the killing of George Floyd.
I would have never anticipated that we would lose control of both the Capitol and the floors. So maybe the first inkling that was different is how hateful and spiteful and violent this crowd was.
Tonight, Capitol Police and D.C. police are getting help from neighboring communities, neighboring police departments in Maryland and Virginia, as well as the National Guard in Virginia, D.C. and Maryland. Tonight, it is all hands on deck here in the D.C. area. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello, thanks. NBC's Andrea Mitchell has covered Congress and the White House for many years. I think we all agree we've not seen anything quite like the way this day has played out, Andrea. But I want to raise the question with you that I did with Michael a moment ago, Bechelos, about what the next 2 weeks could bring.
Well, it is so hard to predict. I think there will be censure, some action taken, certainly by the House members. You're seeing tonight one Republican from Washington State, Kathy McMorris Rodgers, saying that she will no longer object. She was one of the objectors. I know you talked to the other congressmen who will still object, but they have to rethink how much responsibility they had for what happened today.
And Andrea, what does this mean? Will this be an easier or harder Biden presidency because of this, at least in the beginning?
I think the poison in the atmosphere makes it so much more difficult coming in. He has so much healing to do, but there is a real a signal, at least from Mitch McConnell, that things might be different. There may be some way to come together in the middle.
All right. Andrea, thank you. So here we are at the end of an extraordinary and chaotic day in the history of our country. We've seen an assault on our democracy like we've never seen. The normally routine exercise of certifying, or in this case, counting the votes of a presidential election turning into a life-threatening attack on one of the pillars of our country. Gunfire, a woman dies, others wounded, members of Congress in gas masks, hiding under their desks, saying prayers. The U.S. Capitol occupied and under siege. The questions will linger for a long time. On a very basic level, just how could an angry mob breach what should have been one of the most secure buildings in the world? Why did it take so long for authorities, including President Trump himself, to respond? And what responsibility will the president ultimately bear for what happened today? Tonight, members of Congress are vowing to get back to the process of certifying the election of Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. Despite what we've been through today, our democracy is strong, and there will be a transfer of power exactly 2 weeks from today, right there at the U.S. Capitol. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.